Hi, you're watching New Time on Silkway TV channel. We bring you the most notable news and important events that happened throughout this week in Kazakhstan, Central Asia and around the globe. Stay with us for more details on politics, the economy, as well as social and cultural life, with opinions from the most recognized experts from Kazakhstan and around the world. I'm Nurbek Machani, and here is what you'll see today. Kazakhstan's president addressed Antalya Diplomacy Forum, where Kassym-Jomart Tokayev pointed to one of the key reasons behind the deadlock at the UN: what is holding the system back. The world is talking more but agreeing less, so what's the real value of international forums today? The head of SICA spoke about whether the dialogue platform can still make a difference. Donald Trump has announced a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Will the 10 days ease tensions? Tonight we begin at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, a gathering that has drawn global power players for one of the most closely watched diplomatic events of the week. Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is there at the invitation of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, taking part in high-level talks. On the panel stage, President Tokayev warned that the old rules of international security are no longer holding. In this regard, he has called for a rethink of how the UN Security Council operates, while highlighting a broader shift already underway: the rise of so-called middle powers. Countries that may not dominate globally but are increasingly stepping in to shape outcomes and take responsibility on the world stage.
We are very much responsible. Of course, I'm not going to hail ourselves and say, okay, we are the best in the world. But at the same time, we are showing practically as well as diplomatically a big extent of our responsibility with regard to the global affairs. So it wouldn't be presumptuous to say that the middle powers at the moment nowadays are much more responsible than big powers, major powers that are sitting in the Security Council and blocking the resolution of all crucial problems that unfortunately do exist on the global agenda.
President Tokayev also turned his attention to the Middle East, where the ripple effects of conflict are being felt far beyond the region itself. He warned that the economic consequences are already global, with markets and trade systems absorbing the shock. Much of the current debate, he noted, is focused on a familiar flashpoint: the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical shipping lanes. But the president of Kazakhstan made a key point here. This corridor was already functioning as an open channel for global trade before tensions escalated. In other words, he suggested that the problem is not just access, it runs deeper into instability that now surrounds it. And his broader message was a warning to the international system itself: the world can no longer afford diplomacy that reacts after crises erupt. Instead, he called for a more forward-looking approach: early warning, early coordination and real prevention before conflicts spill over into global disruption.
As to Kazakhstan, we have expressed our solidarity with the Persian Gulf states, first of all. And then we called all states to exercise the strategic restraint and to stop military actions in that part of the world. But everybody felt its negative impacts. First of all, the economy has suffered a lot. Nowadays, everybody is speaking about the freedom of sailing through the Hormuz corridor. Yes, it's very much important, but we must remember and take into account that before the conflict, the sea corridor has already been opened for free trade. So we should focus, first of all, on the nutshell of the problem. The nutshell of the problem is the spreading out of nuclear technologies and nuclear arms. And this problem must be in the very center of our negotiations as far as we are talking about Iran's conflict.
Kazakhstan and Turkey have over 3 decades evolved from symbolic Turkic brotherhood into a pragmatic strategic partnership. Today, these ties go beyond rhetoric, encompassing concrete cooperation in energy, transit routes and geopolitical initiatives. At the same time, behind the facade of the partnership lie economic calculations and competing interests. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's visit to Antalya Diplomacy Forum may mark the beginning of a new phase in bilateral relations. How this partnership has been transforming in recent years, Almir Amirov reports.
Turkey was the first country to recognize Kazakhstan's independence in 1991. Just 3 months later, diplomatic relations were established. Since then, Ankara has constantly promoted the idea of Turkic world, in which Kazakhstan serves as a key partner in Central Asia. Today, the two countries are aligned across multiple levels, bilateral, regional, and global, including within the platforms such as United Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or the Organization of Turkic States. The depth of the relationship is best reflected in the numbers. Turkey consistently ranks among Kazakhstan's top 5 trading partners. Bilateral trade grew by nearly 9% last year, with Kazakhstan's exports rising even faster, up to 18% to nearly $4 billion. This suggests Astana is strengthening its position in the Turkish markets. Investment ties are also expanding. Turkish investment reached around $390 million last year alone, bringing the total to over $6 billion in the past 2 decades. Behind those figures are nearly 100 investment projects worth around $4 billion, spanning construction, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and agriculture. Another 50 projects of similar value are currently underway. But perhaps the most strategically significant area of cooperation is transport. Last year, rail cargo between the two countries reached 6.4 million tons, a 35% increase year-on-year. More than 4 million tons moved through Trans-Caspian route alone. Over the past 7 years, volumes along the corridor have grown 5-fold, and delivery times have been cut to just 13 days.
In this context, the Middle Corridor project plays a particularly important role, opening up new opportunities for the development of the country's transport and logistics potential. Kazakhstan's significance in this area will only continue to grow. In addition, your country possesses abundant natural resources and strong potential for agricultural development. Against the backdrop of increasing importance of food security, Kazakhstan holds serious competitive advantages in these fields.
Energy ties run even deeper. Kazakhstan continues to ship oil through Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, making Turkey an indispensable outlet for Kazakh hydrocarbons. Agricultural trade is following the same route. Agro-industrial exports between the two countries grew more than 25% last year, reaching $360 million, with Kazakhstan sending grain, oilseeds, and feed crops westward.
First and foremost, these are agricultural sectors. We have strong examples, such as greenhouse projects in Shymkent and deep wheat processing and gluten production projects in Astana. In addition, there is interest in metal processing and subsoil resource development. Turkish investors are also showing interest in sectors such as logistics and the food industry. At the same time, Kazakh investors are interested in investing in Turkey's artificial intelligence, banking, financial and tourism sectors. And this work is currently ongoing.
Yet the most resilient part of the partnership may be the least visible. Over the past decade, dense web of everyday connections has formed between the two societies. Visa-free travel, growing tourism flows, student exchanges, and steady expansion of business mobility. For instance, in 2024, more than 850,000 Kazakh tourists visit Turkey, and more than 103,000 Turkish nationals visited Kazakhstan in return. That rhythm of contact builds trust that no trade agreement can manufacture.
And other than that, people to people, so sometimes we forget about these connections, people to people connections. So again, visa-free regimes in two countries, so we have tons of many people in Kazakhstan, from Kazakhstan traveling to Turkey every year, or vice versa, many Turkish citizens visiting Kazakhstan, building this networks at the very people to people level. So this is also kind of could be considered one of the solid foundations of the bilateral relationship between the two countries.
Against this backdrop of deepening economic ties and growing human connections, high-level political dialogue is also gaining a new momentum. The Antalya Diplomacy Forum is emerging as a platform where Astana and Ankara can translate their strategic partnership into new agreements. The meeting of the heads of state signals an intent to elevate cooperation further. Almir Amirov, New Time.
As conflicts grind on across the map, the tensions simmer across the globe. The architecture of international diplomacy is under strain. Multilateral institutions are deadlocked. Trust between major powers is eroding. And yet the world keeps talking. One of those conversations is happening this week at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum in Turkey, where foreign ministers, head of state and senior officials gather against the backdrop of deepening geopolitical fractures. But does gathering in the same room actually change anything? We put that question to Kairat Sarabay, Secretary General of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia. Kairat Sarabay himself doesn't claim that forums like Antalya deliver immediate solutions, but he argues they serve a different, quieter purpose, creating conditions for dialogue where leaders not only speak but also listen to each other. Interview of the week right now.
What is the ADF, Antalya Diplomatic Forum? It's a great creation of middle power, Turkey. The role of it's very indispensable. Turkey plays a crucial role in many regional aspects of global politics. So I think that it is the right place and it is the right time to discuss. So practically the Antalya Diplomatic Forum is the manifestation of Turkey's soft power. I think that the participation of many leaders, including the leadership of many SICA member states, is a sign of the request of international community to have a such dialogue. Because Antalya Diplomatic Forum brings many different stakeholders, not only the state leaders, but also the practitioners like diplomats, international organizations, analytics, and many others. So what we need now, we have to have the dialogue, the platform for dialogue, where all will be more or less flexible in order to discuss the order, in order to discuss what kind of instruments, what kind of tools the international community need to get at least normalized relation. It might not produce immediate solutions to all existing conflicts, but at least to listening to each other. This is the diplomatic goal, the main goal of these forums.
Great, and as you mentioned, an open dialogue. Do you think this kind of platforms, they are laying a foundation for future agreements, or they are which are not rather publicly, signed? And in general, what are going to be the key agenda for this year's Antalya Forum?
I believe that the developments on the ground in many parts of the world will be topics, but I believe that Antalya, located just in the area where we observe the real hotspots and hostilities. And I think that the situation in Western Asia will be central, but we should also think why that happens. We should not only concentrate on very acute problems, we have also to discuss the reasons or the grassroots of these conflicts. And again, the agreements can come only after negotiation. If you talking to each other, this is already creates the condition for reaching agreement or disagreement. So leaders have to talk to each other, have to listen to each other. It's not enough to talk. It's very important that leaders will also listen to each other.
And to wrap up our interview, the last question is that, in your view, right, what is the true measure of the effectiveness of such forums? You mentioned the open dialogue. You mentioned that the leaders of the countries have to listen to each other in order to see and resolve the problems that we have nowadays. But also, do they have the concrete signings of agreements or shifts in rhetoric, perhaps the reduction in tension that is not always visible to the public?
Antalya Diplomatic Forum, if that forum will produce some new agreements, if that will be sealed on the margins of Antalya Forum, which is not the very much desperate goal of such gatherings, it will reach its goals. Because again, platforms for dialogue is very much needed, and I believe that we have to turn back to respect the international law. We have to turn back to the multilateral structures that's facilitating the implementation of international law.
Ideas voiced by President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum are already gaining traction across global media. The forum's main media partner, Anadolu Agency, highlighted that Astana and Ankara could play a very positive role in tackling the most acute global issues. The outlet also quoted the Kazakh president, stressing that Turkey, as well as Kazakhstan, as well as other countries that are present today at the audience, must prove that they are very much responsible with regard to international peace and security. Coverage also pointed to his remarks on the Middle East conflict.
Tokayev underlined that Kazakhstan is very much concerned with making appropriate efforts to stop or block the spread of this conflict and appeals around the world. Talking about Iran, Tokayev underlined that governments should focus on the root causes of instability, including nuclear proliferation, and avoid politicizing secondary issues.
Chinese media likewise gave significant attention, noting that Kazakhstan has taken an active role in attempting to facilitate peace and de-escalate tensions in the US-Israeli tensions involving Iran, while maintaining a neutral stance amid the disruption to global oil and gas supplies. The South China Morning Post also focused on Tokayev's broader agenda, including the impact of artificial intelligence and his proposal to establish reliable and well-functioning international frameworks under the UN to oversee it. Another key theme was his call to reform the United Nations, arguing that the global body must be strengthened if multilateral diplomacy is restored to peace and security.
At the three-day summit ending on Sunday, he underscored that major diplomatic decisions were increasingly being made outside the UN, even as its role remained essential.
Meanwhile, Turkey today emphasized calls made during the panel session, Mapping Tomorrow, Managing Uncertainties for Stronger Diplomacy and More Effective Forecasting of Regional and Global Conflicts, and that the most important thing is to upgrade the level of efficiency and credibility of the United Nations in the world. Before departing for the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, Kazakh's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev met with the UN Secretary General Special Envoy on Water, Retno Marsudi, in Astana, stressing that the water resources are strategic priority for Kazakhstan, are vital for sustainable development and regional stability. He also called for stronger international cooperation, including his initiative to establish an international water organization under the UN, with further discussions expected at the upcoming Regional Ecological Summit in Astana. The event is set for next week and aims to shape a shared vision for sustainable development. It will bring together governments, international organizations, and development partners in cooperation with the United Nations. Bukhara, a city long defined by its place at the crossroads of empires and ancient trade routes, has once again become the setting for a consequential diplomatic moment. Last Saturday, Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev met informally with his Uzbek counterpart Shavkat Mirziyoyev. As the ties between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are accelerating, bilateral trade has surged by more than 16% over the past year, nearing the $5 billion mark, as both countries deepen industrial cooperation and align their economic priorities. Now, with an ambitious target to double that figure to $10 billion, this partnership is beginning to look less like a routine regional diplomacy and more like a calculated effort to reshape Central Asia's economic center of gravity. To understand what this meeting truly signals and what has become clear in its aftermath, here's our report.
The visit began at one of Uzbekistan's most revered spiritual landmarks, the Bahauddin Naqshbandi Memorial Complex. There, Presidents Tokayev and Mirziyoyev stepped into a space where history, faith, and national identity converge. The mausoleum, dating back to the 16th century, now stands as a carefully preserved archive of the region's intellectual and spiritual heritage, housing rare manuscripts and a handwritten Quran from the 19th century. In a moment that underscores underscored the tone of the visit, both leaders offered prayers for peace and prosperity. President Shavkat Mirziyoyev used the moment to underscore the depth of shared historical memory, presenting Kassym-Jomart Tokayev the previously unpublished 20th century documents uncovered in Uzbekistan. The artifacts are closely tied to the legacy of the Hoja Ahmed Yesevi and Rabia Sultan Begim mausoleums, landmarks of profound spiritual significance in Turkestan, often described as the cultural and spiritual heart of modern Kazakhstan. Many of these documents had never been made public before, adding a layer of historical weight to what was already a symbolically charged exchange between the two leaders. The visit then continued in other Bukhara's most iconic sites, including the Ark Fortress, the Labi House complex, and the Mashkur Jusub Kopeyev Museum.
Здесь в полной мере ощущается дыхание их времен.
Here one can fully feel the breath of the time and the grandeur of the civilization that has had a tremendous influence on the progress of all humanity. At the present stage, Bukhara organically combines its millennia-old traditions with the dynamic development of modern Uzbekistan. Today we had a quick look at modern Bukhara. A full-scale comprehensive reconstruction of all buildings has been carried out. This is the result of very extensive work and, most importantly, of state care for such a magnificent historical heritage.
The president of Kazakhstan publicly thanked his Uzbek counterpart for being among the first foreign leaders to congratulate him on the adoption of Kazakhstan's new constitution. But beyond the exchange of protocol and congratulations, the conversation also turned toward a more forward-looking agenda. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev expressed support for President Mirziyoyev's so-called Clean Air Initiative, proposing that the two countries work jointly on environmental challenges affecting their largest urban centers, such as Almaty and Tashkent, where rapid growth and industrialization are increasingly colliding with concerns over air quality and public health.
Given the current unstable geopolitical situation, the visit takes on particular significance. For Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan remains a reliable strategic partner. The signed agreements and arrangements are being consistently implemented. All relevant work is being carried out under my supervision.
In turn, Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev emphasized the strategic weight of the visit of Kazakhstan's president, describing it as a key step in advancing what both sides now call a multi-faceted partnership with a strong focus on the economic agenda. The numbers underscore that trajectory. Officials say 67 joint projects valued at more than $2 billion are currently underway, spanning sectors from manufacturing to infrastructure. Looking ahead, both sides have signaled plans to deepen collaboration further in trade, industry, transport, energy, and information technology. Additionally, the two presidents also agreed on a joint roadmap designed to accelerate economic cooperation.
67 проектов – это перспективные проекты.
These 67 projects are promising initiatives across the metallurgy sector, agriculture, and the textile industry. Plans include the construction of textile plant in the city of Kazakh, as well as the creation of textile cluster. In addition, the launch of the metallurgical production facilities is planned on the basis of the Central Asian region, forming an international center for industrial cooperation.
A notable addition to the program came in the form of artificial intelligence hackathon. More than 1,000 young developers, engineers, and students took part, working through practical, real-world challenges in sectors ranging from healthcare and education to business innovation through the lens of AI-driven solutions.
Хотел бы отдельно отметить.
I would like to particularly highlight the market entry program. Last year, 10 startups from Uzbekistan came to Astana, where we provided them with accommodation, working conditions, consulting support, and opportunities to help Uzbek startups enter the Kazakh market. An identical program is also being implemented for Kazakh startups in Tashkent.
В части партнерства Astana Hub.
In terms of partnership, Astana Hub and IT Park Uzbekistan serve as a benchmark example of cooperation. In 2024, we signed agreements and established a Central Asian Innovation Hub. We also jointly position our programs and events. We already have hubs in the United States, the United Arab Emirates, and China.
The working visit then continued with a focus on both security and economic modernization. The president visited the Situation Center, where regional security is monitored in real time and emergency responses are coordinated. Then they toured a modern textile cluster, a full-cycle production facility from cotton processing to finished goods, exporting to markets across Europe and Asia. As ties between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan continue to expand across trade, industry, security and technology, officials on both sides are framing this trajectory as part of a broader regional focus. In that sense, this visit may be less about a single diplomatic moment and more about the direction both countries now appear determined to take together. Baljan Samigulina, Diana Tasambayeva, New Time.
Mid-April is bringing a new wave of developments across Kazakhstan and Central Asia, from nuclear energy ambitions and expanding rail connectivity to regional cooperation and border modernization. The region continues to deepen integration on multiple fronts. To break down the key stories shaping this week, we turn our weekly segment, Central Asia in Focus. My colleague Almir Amirov is joining me now. Almir, hello. What do you have for us today?
Thank you, Nurbek. Indeed, the region is showing clear signs of both economic acceleration and strategic coordination. Let's take a closer look together. Kazakhstan has reaffirmed its commitment to nuclear safety by presenting its 5th national report at the 10th review meeting of the Convention on Nuclear Safety, held under the auspices of the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. The report outlines steady progress in aligning the country's nuclear sector with international standards and best practices. Officials highlighted ongoing efforts to strengthen national nuclear infrastructure, including plans to construct 2 nuclear power plants as part of Kazakhstan's long-term energy strategy. Particular emphasis was placed on enhancing regulatory frameworks with the establishment of a dedicated atomic energy agency and an independent oversight body to ensure strict control over nuclear and radiation safety. Participation in the review meeting reflects Kazakhstan's intention to fully meet its obligations under the convention and further integrate into the global nuclear safety system. At the same time, economic dynamics across the region are accelerating, with transport infrastructure playing a central role in this growth. This trend is clearly shown in the railway system across Central Asia, and Kazakhstan is at the heart of this surge. Freight volumes between Kazakhstan and its regional neighbors have jumped by 34%, reflecting a sharp rise in trade and economic connectivity. Behind the numbers are real flows of goods. Grain exports alone surged by 50%, exceeding 2 million tons, while shipments of metals and petroleum products continue to grow. And at the same time, Kazakhstan is strengthening its role as a key transit corridor for the region. Cargo moving through the country, from fuel to food, is steadily increasing, turning rail routes into vital economic arteries. Imports are rising as well, with more chemicals, fresh produce and raw materials arriving from neighboring countries. The strongest growth is seen in trade with Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, as Central Asia becomes more interconnected and more strategically important than ever before. Meanwhile, practical steps are being taken to further strengthen regional connectivity and facilitate cross-border movement. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are preparing to reopen a key Gishtelek-Zhebek-Zhule border crossing after a large-scale reconstruction. As one of the busiest land corridors in Central Asia, linking Tashkent and Shymkent, the checkpoint serves as a major artery for both passengers and trade flows between the two countries. Following modernization, its capacity is set to increase dramatically, up to 70,000 people and around 2,000 vehicles per day, which should ease chronic congestion and reduce waiting times at the border. The reconstruction also includes digitalization and upgraded infrastructure, and the introduction of automated control systems will streamline border procedures, making crossing faster and more efficient. In a broader context, the reopening reflects a strategic push by both countries to restore full cross-border connectivity after temporary closures and to unlock additional trade potential across Central Asia. At the humanitarian level, countries in the region are also deepening cooperation through cultural dialogue. Deputy ministers of culture from the 5 Central Asian countries and Russia have discussed the future of multilateral cooperation in the humanitarian sphere. The meeting focused on strengthening cultural ties, expanding joint projects, and preserving shared historical heritage across the region. The meeting reviewed progress under the Joint Action Plan for the upcoming years, highlighting key achievements and outlining practical steps to deepen collaboration across cinema, education, museums, and art. Participants also discussed preparation for the Ethnocultural Forum, the Festival of Cultural and Arts of the Peoples of Central Asia and Russia, which is set to take place in Uzbekistan later this month. The upcoming event is expected to become a major regional platform, showcasing cultural diversity while reinforcing dialogue and long-term partnerships. And that's all from me on this week. Nurbek, the floor is back to you.
Thank you, Almir. We continue. US President Donald Trump said that Israel and Lebanon had agreed to a temporary ceasefire following direct conversation with their leaders. According to the White House, the truce is expected to take effect at midnight local time, marking a potential de-escalation after weeks of heightened tensions.
I just had excellent conversation with the highly respected President Joseph Aoun of the Lebanon and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. These two leaders have agreed that in order to achieve peace between their countries, they will formally begin a 10-day ceasefire at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Tuesday, the two countries met for the first time in 34 years here in Washington, D.C. with our great Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I have directed Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Rubio, together with the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff Dan Rosenstein, to work with Israel and Lebanon to achieve a lasting peace. It has been my honor to solve 9 wars across the world, and this will be my 10th, so let's get it done.
President Trump also noted that earlier this week, Israeli and Lebanese representatives had held their first formal talks in more than 3 decades in Washington, facilitated by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The ceasefire initiative comes amid broader diplomatic efforts, including indirect negotiations involving Iran, where a halt to hostilities in Lebanon has reportedly been one of the key conditions. Initial talks, which began last weekend in Islamabad, ended without a breakthrough, though further rounds are expected in the coming days. Early this evening, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that following the implementation of the ceasefire, maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz could proceed without any disruption for the duration of 10-day ceasefire.
In line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of ceasefire on the coordinated route as already announced by Ports and Maritime Organization of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
The conflict in the Middle East is now echoing across the global economy. The United Nations warned that up to 32 million people could be pushed into poverty, with the heaviest toll falling on the world's most fragile economies. In a new report, the UN Development Programme describes a triple shock gripping the global system: disrupted energy supplies, strained food supply chains, and slowing economic growth. Experts are also raising alarms of the growing chain reaction: fertilizer shortages, shipping disruptions, and rising costs, all converging into what they call a ticking time bomb for global food security. And in Lebanon, the threat has already materialized. Supply chains are breaking down, prices are rising, and for millions, access to basic food is slipping further out of reach.
What we're witnessing is not just a displacement crisis. It is rapidly becoming a food security crisis. We're already seeing clear signs of rising food prices across Lebanon. In just 1 month, the price of vegetables has surged by more than 20%. Bread prices have increased by 17%. For families who are already struggling, this is deeply concerning. And what we're now seeing is a very worrying combination. Prices are rising, incomes are disrupted, and demand is increasing as displacement continues. For many families, food is still available, but it's becoming increasingly unaffordable.
Meanwhile, Hungary has entered a political turning point as elections wrapped up last Sunday. After 16 years, Viktor Orban has conceded defeat, with opposition leader Peter Magyar securing a sweeping two-thirds majority in parliament, reshaping the country's political landscape. In a moment of transition, Orban has congratulated his rival while signaling that he is not stepping away from the public life, pledging to continue serving Hungarians from the opposition benches. But what does this dramatic shift mean for Hungary's future, and could it alter Budapest ties with partners like Kazakhstan? More on what comes next from Baljan Samigulina.
After 16 years in power, Viktor Orban has been voted out of government despite efforts to reshape election rules in favor of his party. In a striking moment, he was quick to admit defeat even before all the votes had been counted.
Dear friends, while the election outcome is not yet final, it is already clear and understandable. It is a painful result for us, but unmistakable. The responsibility and possibility of governing were not given to us.
These words mark the end of a long era, delivering a landslide victory to be once upstart opposition force. With 46% of the vote counted, the center-right pro-EU TISA party, led by Peter Magyar, was projected to secure 135 seats out of 199-member parliament. Orban's rule had faced mounting criticism in recent years, both at home and abroad, particularly in Brussels, over concerns about democratic backsliding, including the erosion of judicial independence, pressure on state media, and the weakening of individual rights. His defeat is also likely to resonate beyond Hungary's borders, dealing a blow to his closest allies on the international stage.
It is a strong message, the fact that Orban has lost, and has lost also very strongly towards the US, towards Russia, towards everyone who had been supporting him. The current Trump administration was strongly supporting him. The visit of Vance to Budapest just before the election was a strong sign of support. So the fact that someone who has been strongly supported by Washington and by Moscow has been defeated, and has been hugely defeated in his country, is also a signal towards these governments, administrations, that there's a limit in terms of how you can affect elections in the member states.
Experts say a new prime minister in Budapest could mark the end of Hungary's confrontational stance inside the European Union, potentially unlocking a €90 billion package for Ukraine that had been blocked under Orban. It may also pave the way for the release of EU funds previously frozen over concerns about democratic standards.
Orban regime, which couldn't have any innovation in the last few years. The corruption was higher than ever, along with the inflation, while the economy is stuck in the level of 2022. I think these are the main reasons behind the huge victory of Peter Magyar, and if his political skills are a relevant factor, but not the most relevant ones. I think the economic reasons behind are much more relevant, and it was a revolution for the youngsters as well.
For Peter Magyar, this is a decisive victory. Not a traditional outsider, he spent years within Orban's own Fidesz party and held government roles before breaking with the establishment in 2024 amid a corruption scandal, emerging as a credible alternative. Though the Magyar's profile blends contrasts, socially conservative, yet campaigning on reform, anti-corruption, and a more pragmatic pro-European course.
We are ready to eradicate this industrial-scale corruption, as this is largely why Hungary and Hungarian people are not receiving the 8,000 billion forints of EU funds. And well, this is why the economy disappeared. This is why we have become Europe's poorest and most corrupt country. So we will have a huge responsibility to get the office up and running as soon as possible. I can tell you that we can hope to be there in June. I will personally do everything to get it set up as quickly as possible.
Leaders in Europe were swift to welcome Magyar's win, pointing to a new direction in relations between Budapest and Brussels.
Parlament
I have to say, for me this is one of the best pieces of news that we clearly still have such a high degree of resilience in a democratic society, like Hungary's. The country is sending a very clear signal against right-wing populism across the whole world.
It is evident that Hungary's foreign policy priorities will shift, particularly regarding cooperation along the Turkic track. Under Viktor Orban, the country leans into platforms like the Organization of Turkic States, partly to offset its limited influence within the European Union. With Peter Magyar expected to take a more pro-European course, some analysts believe that emphasis could gradually shift. However, Maraz Raimbayev, advisor to the chairman of the board at Maksut Narikbayev University, argues that Hungary's relationship with Kazakhstan is likely to remain a priority.
Astana will remain the same in the list of priority for any government in Hungary. The reason is quite simple, because first, we share very understandable, pragmatic diplomatic relationships, both in multilateral and bilateral tracks. Hungary itself is very well positioned in between of European continent, and its own policy to turn to the east means absolute necessity to have strong and stable relationships with Central Asia and particularly with Kazakhstan.
So internationally, Magyar's victory carries symbolic weight as Viktor Orban's defeat signals a potential weakening of the nationalist model. Analysts say it could also influence upcoming elections in Italy, France and Germany. But with the strong mandate comes significant expectations. Magyar now faces the challenge of delivering on his promises and holding together the broad coalition that brought him to power. Balzhan Samigulina, Ulhanbek Manarbek, New Time.
In Astana, special training sessions for aspiring journalists were held by experts from one of China's largest media corporations, CMG. The sessions were organized by the TV and radio complex of the President of Kazakhstan in partnership with Maksut Narikbayev University. Students took part in meeting and hands-on workshops focused on multimedia content production aimed at developing reporting skills in an international environment. Participants had the opportunity to work on real-life cases, engage directly with experts and produce their own media projects. Chinese specialists also highlighted Kazakhstan's high level of artificial intelligence adoption, including in the television sector.
I think the artificial intelligence is really bringing new opportunities, because this is really something new for the humanity itself. We never have facing something like this before. So it's always been a gesture of embracing artificial intelligence, because it is of high efficiency and to some extent, in some contexts, it has really high accuracy. But also at the same time bring, in the journalism fields, coming with ethical perspectives that people are still be aware of that. I think the importance of journalism is to bring in the facts and accuracy.
And that's it for today. All the main news about Kazakhstan and Central Asia can be found here. More special projects about our country are available on Silkway TV channel. So stay tuned and see you next week.